Hi everybody, Rob Ager here with another film analysis video, and this time our topic is the famous dojo fight in the Bruce Lee martial arts movie Fist of Fury, also known as The Chinese Connection. Now there's already been endless discussion and study of Bruce Lee's martial arts style and his level of physical fitness, but personally I think staged fight scenes in movies are a very misleading way of trying to understand the real world of martial arts. Martial arts movies aren't about realism, they're about dramatics and physical power fantasy. So what I'm instead going to talk about here are two subjects that are generally overlooked in regards to Bruce Lee action scenes. First, the cinematic style with which his action scenes are choreographed, shot and edited. And second, the sophisticated psychology that is present in Bruce Lee's body language and facial expressions during his action scenes. He was a master of non-verbal communication, and being that Bruce himself was deeply involved in the choreography and direction of his own action scenes, I believe his personal philosophy manifests itself in those scenes, even though there's hardly any dialogue. And I believe this is the key element that makes Bruce Lee fight scenes so hypnotic, so mesmerizing, even to this day. On some levels we can argue that Bruce Lee's fight scenes look dated. The blood looks like ketchup, there's fast zooms to facial expressions, which for some reason was popular in Eastern cinema but not Western cinema. And the dubbed dialogue, which, even in the original language, makes the acting seem terrible at times. But being that there's hardly any dialogue in Bruce's fight scenes, that doesn't really matter. However, in other ways I believe Bruce's action scenes have not only stood the test of time, but are still much better than the vast majority of martial arts fight scenes that have been made since. Okay, so let's go through the scene from the beginning and examine the details. As usual with martial arts movies, the plot basically exists as an excuse for fight scenes, so we'll skip the reasons why Bruce is in this situation. And I'm going to continue calling him Bruce, not by his character name, because Bruce the actor is far more important to the audience than the character he's playing. So Bruce has stepped into enemy territory and is looking for a fight. Right away he begins making use of non-verbal psychology. He keeps his gaze fixed on the highest ranking enemy in the room, and he doesn't break it even for a second while putting the placard out the way. Fixed and unflinching eye contact is essential for intimidating opponents before a fight, and it works well because when a person is afraid it tends to show in their eyes. So a fearless gaze can be intimidating even when the opponent is physically bigger. So the first guy who approaches Bruce matches that gaze. But Bruce has already done something psychologically to put his opponent at a disadvantage. With his arms folded, he doesn't look like he's in a prepared stance for fighting, but look at his left hand, which is hidden under his right arm. The fist is clenched, while the right hand is in a position convenient for chopping. Being more prepared for battle than your opponent thinks you are is a great advantage to have. Now I don't know exactly what this little fellow was intended to do here by slowly grabbing at Bruce's arm, but the key thing is Bruce's response. That lightning fast chop looks like a single move, but it's actually a deflection of the incoming hand followed by a chop. And as far as I can tell, there's no fancy editing there to make things look faster. Bruce was really fast. So this moment establishes how dangerous he is even from an apparently casual position. It's not just a defensive strike, it's a gesture to the rest of the group. Hence he keeps his gaze fixed on them even as he hits his opponent for a second time. Now of course we're getting into action fantasy unrealism, being that the guy attacks from behind but does nothing except grab Bruce's shoulders and leaves himself open for an obvious elbow to the stomach. But as a dramatic gesture it works fine. Bruce is showing the rest of the group that he can fight one of their best with so much ease that he doesn't even need to break eye contact. And something else that works incredibly well dramatically is that when Bruce throws this guy, the camera swiftly pans and the shot finishes on the next challenger leaping up and into view. Think of it as a camera arts gesture instead of martial arts. And combined with that nice bit of camera work, the music kicks in, which is so ominous it sounds like someone's about to be sent to their grave. Bruce's body language is superb here. After throwing the guy, he maintains a post-throw pose, then slowly drifts back to a normal position, gracefully returning to his original composure. It's a really unusual thing to do in a fight, and I consider it akin to hypnotizing his opponent. There's a typical series of physical gestures that guys go through when building up to a fight: raised voices, escalating muscular tension, teeth baring, and the adoption of attack pose displays, etc. By breaking the expected patterns and doing the opposite by being slow and relaxed, Bruce becomes a mesmerizing presence. I think of it as being similar to a snake. Snakes move slowly and gracefully, which psychologically disarms their targets before they lunge with a super fast attack. I can't emphasize enough, non-verbal communication is key to Bruce's action scenes. It's not just about technical fighting maneuvers. The new challenger here reveals with his heavy breathing that despite his leap of prowess, clenched fists gesture, he's actually a bit scared. Actually, that's one of the reasons guys tense themselves up before a fight. It disguises their nervous fear, which would otherwise come across through trembling and heavy breathing. But Bruce, he's calm and his breathing barely even noticeable. The hands on hips gesture conveys confidence in his ability to defend himself. That's common in real-life aggression psychology too, but usually with more stupidity. Guys squaring up to each other with arms and legs open, daring the other to land a punch or even a knee in the groin. But when someone effectively takes the bait, they're in trouble. So Bruce fends off this guy with one hand and throws him back into the centre of the room. Note again that he holds his position after the throw, making it a sort of fighting pose in itself, or like he's doing a performance of Hamlet. Then he morphs like slow water into his next fighting position. And that slow, fixed eye contact walk towards his opponent, he's like a cat preparing to pounce. The contrast between these slow, smooth movements and his moments of sudden, fast attack, I think is one of the key traits of Bruce Lee's hypnotic on-screen charisma. A lot of action scenes in other martial arts movies, especially today, try to wow the audience by being continually fast and frenetic with no pause for breath. It can be very impressive, but it gets tedious at times as well, and it's incredibly unrealistic. I haven't seen any other movie star martial artist who engages in the kind of graceful movements that Bruce does. He looks like he's meditating and fighting at the same time, like he's in a spiritual workout routine. Now this little burst of energy from Bruce is marvellous. With the music it's kinda like we're watching a standoff between two gunfighters, and my god, Bruce is fast. Slowing it down, I see no evidence of frames being deleted to speed up the action, and there's only one camera cut to show guy number 2 hitting the ground. Of course we expect Bruce to take the first guy out, but we don't expect the other guy to come charging back in. But Bruce hasn't forgotten he's there and takes them both out. That's quite important dramatically, sets something up that the audience knows will happen but adds something else that they don't expect. And adding even more weight to the moment, it's been arranged that all the extras will leap up in response to the first kick. You see how well thought out the choreography is here? Most martial arts movies aim almost exclusively for fancy technical fighting moves, but Bruce Lee had an understanding of stage dramatics and how to work with the technicalities of the cinema medium, not just the martial arts medium. It's a hugely overlooked facet of his movies. Just one other little observation about this moment. We can see that Bruce quickly withdraws his foot from the first guy so as not to really hurt him. Fast and controlled. So, now a big dramatic shift in the scene. We've had a little bit of fighting and a lot of psychological posing and gesturing, and now everyone is gearing up to attack Bruce at once. To dramatically emphasise the shift of interpersonal dynamics, we cut to a high, tilted angle. This achieves several things. It gives a single-shot view of the entire circle of opponents. It shows Bruce as the dominating centre of gravity in the room. Note that the opponents begin circling Bruce like he's the eye of a hurricane. And as they circle him, the camera begins tilting itself. Tilted camera angles carry quite a specific psychological function in movies. They convey a sense that reality itself is being twisted or distorted. So with the drum rolls here, I think the tilting shot kind of implies that we're entering into Bruce's spiritual realm. Everything else until this point has been from conventional head-height camera positions.
Wait, you good?
Now that spiritual realm thing might sound weird, but pay attention to this. Bruce adopts a strange pose in which he is looking downward, just like the camera is looking down at everyone in the room, a God's eye view. He can't see 360 degrees at once, so it's like he's sensing all of his opponents either through sound or some supernatural means. And look at his hands. They seem to be placed on some imaginary surface, and as he begins rotating his hands, everybody in the room rotates in response, and so does the camera. It's surreal. And when he quickly shifts his pose, all his opponents respond to it in near enough the same way. So it's like he's the puppet master and he's got all of them on imaginary strings. Brilliant. And to make it even more bizarre, he starts making cat noises. Like with his snake and cat-like physical movements, he's confusing his opponents on the level of sound. Who the hell makes noises like that during a fight? Although in reality a bunch of guys like this would just rush in and pummel their opponent, whether it's Bruce Lee or not, the basic principles of what he does with his body and his voice in this choreographed scene are in some ways right on the money. If someone is preparing to attack you and you start acting in ways they completely don't expect, either by making weird noises or adopting unfamiliar postures and movements, then your opponent will almost certainly feel less confident of their own ability to take you on, because their initial confidence depends on you being predictable. So continuing with psychological dramatics rather than the realism of what we'd expect in a fight between one guy versus a gang of 20, Bruce removes his jacket. And there's a funny little error from Bruce here. He forgets the last button on his jacket, tries to pull it off, realises, then sneakily undoes the last button and then pulls his jacket off. It would have been so easy for Bruce to just break composure, laugh and call cut. And also I think that the intense look in his eyes draws our attention away from the error anyway. The camera dollies in so that when the jacket comes off we get a good look at his super lean physique. And rather than just pulling his jacket off at a predictable pace, he gives it a little yank, and like puppets, everyone responds to the gesture. I think those little leading gestures he makes are important. They establish that he is in control of the situation. Events are unfolding according to my design, as the Emperor put it in Return of the Jedi. So he gives a little tense up of his muscles to intimidate and signal that he's ready. And it's important that he be the only one with his jacket off so as to single him out as the one with the muscles. And that facial grunt he gives kinda looks to me like a bull about to launch an attack. He does a lot of things that seem to be related to animals like cats and bulls and snakes. Now the gang could have just attacked him while his jacket was half off and caught him in a bit of a twist, but their moment of attack comes according to when he's decided he's ready. So in a continuous high angle, unedited shot he takes out 8 guys with kicks to the face, including several roundhouses. The roundhouses are important here because with them he can take out people from all angles. Now what I love about this is that although what is unfolding is wildly unrealistic, Bruce's incredible physical fitness, flexibility and speed are real. He's like a spinning top. In most martial arts movies, a lot of convenient camera angle cuts or speeded up footage are used to hide the fact that the main star isn't nearly as physically skilled as the narrative makes out. But not so with Bruce, at least so far in this scene anyway. His very real physical prowess, shown mostly in unedited shots, makes it easier to accept the fantastical notion of him fighting 24 guys at once. And just for added dramatic effect, he tops off his last kick with an arching arm gesture and a quick return of his attention to the rest of the room. Such thought and precision in his physical acting. I think it's significant here as well that all of his fighting so far has consisted of counter-attacks. He waits for others to launch an attack first. In other words, he's not the aggressor. Change of camera work and choreography now, a side-scrolling shot of Bruce taking a half-dozen guys out. Conveniently all the people in the background are just bouncing back and forth and doing nothing. But there's an example of Bruce doing something here that I quite like in his action scenes generally. As he finishes counter-attacking one person, he uses the finishing pose as the launching position for his next fighting manoeuvre. An elbow to someone else's stomach, and that move results in him posed and ready to launch a punch to someone else. And he does that weird thing of letting out a war cry after he's hit his opponent instead of before. Maybe it's a warning to stop anyone else attacking from in front, or maybe he does it because an advanced war cry lets the opponent know an attack is coming. Bruce preferred what are commonly known as non-telegraphic movements, that is, unexpected fast attacks done without any warning gestures. And he was the master at doing that. His post-attack war cries are really unusual, and I don't know whether he did this in real sparring matches or fights. If he did, maybe it's another form of psychological attack on his opponent. But anyway, note the dominance of continuous unbroken shots as the fight goes on, allowing us to see Bruce's agility unaided by camera trickery. This is harder to do than it appears, because camera cuts are usually used in martial arts movies to hide the fact that one actor isn't actually hitting another. But Bruce has enough precision to strike at other actors with speed, yet holding back enough not to actually hurt them. That's hard to do. For dramatic effect, there's variation in the long shot camera angles too. The high angle, the close side-scrolling angle, and now a stationary wide shot to show Bruce defending attacks from all directions at once. Despite the speed and complexity of this little choreographed moment, Bruce still manages to act effectively with his face and voice. The voices are dubbed, but we can see he was actually using his voice on set as part of his performance. And with no strings for lifting actors about like we often get today, Bruce is actually physically throwing people quite high in the air. He's really strong. I mean, look at this. He really lifts that guy right over his shoulder. Let's just turn our attention to sound for a moment as well. Tons of martial arts fight scenes use a continuous, tribal-sounding drum roll, but in this scene the only music we've had so far is the build-ups to fighting. During the actual fighting, the music disappears. Instead, the striking sound effects and war cries are the music. To add actual music on top of that would drown out those effects. The issue of sound effects in movie fight scenes is interesting in itself. Real-life kicks and punches don't make such loud smacking and snapping noises, but for some reason Eastern and Western action films still to this day use unrealistic sounds. Maybe part of the issue is that because most of us have hardly ever witnessed a real fight, the difference isn't noticeable to us. But there's also the base issue of cinema dramatics. When watching a fight scene, we have zero physical engagement with the movie. We can't feel any of the impacts physically, so filmmakers have to compensate with exaggerated sounds and movements. So with this uppercut, we have the unrealism of a guy lifted off his feet plus the smacking sound. Ever see a boxer lift someone off their feet with an uppercut like that? No, it doesn't happen. And if a blow did have enough force to do that to someone, then it would likely break their neck, and if it didn't kill them, it would likely give them brain damage. But for dramatic effect, it looked great. So we have this combination with Bruce Lee of his genuinely impressive physical abilities blurred with some unrealistic choreography. For me, most martial arts scenes don't work as well because the lead performer doesn't have enough actual physical prowess to pull off half the moves that appear in the finished edit. But Bruce can do it, and he did. But now this scene has a wobbler moment that reveals Bruce's limitations. Spinning two guys around, it's obvious that dummies are being swung instead because they're lighter. So, fight carries on and someone finally manages to land a hit on Bruce, but he instantly converts the energy of the impact into a diving manoeuvre to grab hold of the nunchucks out of his jacket. Dramatically, that's marvellous because it's unexpected and it leads straight into a pause and the next phase of the conflict. There's no point dragging out Bruce's unarmed performance because it's already been established that he's very effective in that regard. But that thing of converting being struck into a manoeuvre, that seems to be part of Bruce's philosophy as well. That thing where he talks about being like water, adapting to any situation. Now this twirling thing he does, that's an interesting gesture in itself. It's kind of akin to a hypnotist swinging a watch back and forth to put his subjects into a trance. And that wicked twirling sequence with both arms, I really can't tell if that's speeded up footage or not. His eye blinks appear to be at normal speed. and after he hits the first few guys he finishes with some more fancy twirling, and this shot definitely appears to be normal speed, being that the guys moving in the background are obeying the expected laws of gravity. If it was speeded up footage, then their movements would look wrong. Again, Bruce isn't just performing his amazing physical martial arts movements, he's continuing to act with his face throughout all this. Next up, some head whack showing a knockout and drawing blood from another guy. I think at this point his enemies would just run out the room, but the fight goes on. So now a zoom into Bruce's eyes. Why do this now? Well, because the time has now come for him to finish the fight. That's what he's decided he's going to do. Up until now he's just been toying with his opponents. I like that he now glances around, taking note of everyone else's position before going for the kill, and he glances right at the camera as well. Like he's so aware of his surroundings that he's even acknowledging the cinema audience. But he's also listening. The sounds of his opponents moving around are heard during this moment. And of course, his visual range is limited, so sound is the sense that he uses to detect and thus counter attackers from behind. So, wipe a couple of guys out, and then that hypnotic twirling thing again. He twirls himself around, nunchuck extended to frighten off everyone from all angles, then another little rotor blade twirl in front of him to confuse his opponents before he rolls out of danger in the very direction that he was twirling the nunchucks. It's almost like he was twirling them to clear himself a path to roll through. Having someone twirl an object around either during conversation or during a fight is extremely distracting. Your attention can't help but be drawn to the twirling object. It's a key aspect of Bruce Lee's combat philosophy, disarming your enemy through psychological distraction. So now Bruce goes for the final kill to end the fight, and he does so by again changing tactic to something his opponents don't expect. All his fighting so far has been from a standing position. So, caught off guard, they're now attacked from below. By the way, whoever did the sound effects on this scene did an amazing job on getting those swishing noises matched up with the nunchuck movements. Even the rattle of the chain can be heard. And you gotta love Bruce's final bit of showing off nunchuck twirls before stopping in a sort of aristocrat-like composure. His emotional feathers entirely unruffled and not even out of breath. It's superhuman fantasy stuff, of course, but dramatically it's brilliant. Now for me, this is where the scene takes a little bit of a dip in quality. The trainer guy is sat there watching his entire class get wiped out by one guy, and then he steps forward to fight. The problem here is he doesn't look threatening in the slightest himself. I mean, I've got no martial arts training, and I wouldn't be scared of this fella. So what kind of challenge is he gonna be to Bruce Lee? He's not the best looking guy in the world either, so Bruce has the advantage over him on that basic level too. And the contrast between Bruce's calm composure and this guy's red-faced, heavy breathing and swallowing fear gestures, it's all too obvious Bruce is going to beat this guy easily. By the way, notice that Bruce does that thing again of appearing to be casually composed, yet his fist is clenched under his arm. Now we get a low-angle cut to Bruce's face, and it seems to me that this shot has been composed to get a photo into shot of some old guy, presumably some Japanese grandmaster who this class follow. I take this as a reference here to the Japanese opponent being aware that he's fighting to defend his traditions and the honour of his ancestors as much as his personal honour. So he dares to try and give Bruce a slap, and Bruce springs into action, but Bruce changes styles again to confuse his opponent. Cat noises and a spring in his step plus an unusual fighting stance. This guy's baffled by it. And now Bruce does that hypnotic distraction thing again. Extending his fingers, he draws attention to his hands, but then swiftly attacks with his feet. And my god, he can kick fast. Bit of slightly dodgy choreography now. The guy manages to throw Bruce way up in the air, but like a cat, Bruce lands comfortably on his feet, comfortably standing with his back to his opponent for a moment, undefended. Bizarre sound effects in flight too. He sounds like an eagle flapping its wings. The fight choreography from here is well below the standard of the rest of the scene, but Bruce still entertains with little details like that sliding foot gesture, and we get some camera work variation, being that this is the first time in the whole scene that a point of view shot has been used. And he leaps very easily over a bar of wood that's at his chest height. That in itself isn't easy. I can just about do one at waist height. So, all martial arts skills aside now, for some basic beating up the opponent and finishing with a symbolic kick to the backside. He has just kicked everyone's arse, to use the old phrase. Game over, jacket back on, and he even remembers his nunchucks. Would have been easy to forget them. And then back to the tedious dialogue.
你哋記住啊，中國人唔係病夫。
Alright, so that's a wrap. Marvellous scene in terms of cinema dramatics, variations in pacing, appropriate use of camera angles, editing, sound effects and minimal music. But most of all, Bruce Lee's choreography and physical performance communicates aspects of his philosophical and intellectual approach to combat. Misleading and distracting opponents through non-verbal communication, while paying close attention to the little giveaway clues in how they express themselves. Being more prepared for combat than one appears to be. And that weird spiritual calm that allows a person to fully engage with their own momentary sensory awareness to the point that it comes off as an almost supernatural ability to predict what an opponent will do next. And of course the importance of keeping oneself in good physical shape in the first place. The presentation of those ideas in the scene may be fantastical, but those combat principles do work in all forms of combat, from a game of chess to a street fight to global military and economic warfare. For me personally, the manifestation of Bruce Lee's philosophy in his fight scenes, communicated almost entirely without words, is the key ingredient that has made those scenes stand the test of time. And I think people will still be watching these scenes in 30-40 years' time at least. Thanks for watching, I'm Rob Ager. If you enjoyed this, then do subscribe, and if you're interested in more stuff on psychology as well as filmmaking, then check out the many articles and videos on my website, collativelearning.com. Bye for now.